Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. So this is the third episode on the issue of hijab. We have discussed Ustaz Ghamidi's point of view regarding hijab and of course some of the questions that have arisen on it. In this third episode, we will also take a look at some more questions that have arisen on his point of view, and we will also see the way he responds to them. The first question is about the word zina, which is used in verse 31 of Surah Nur. Of course, the words are La yubdina zinatahunna illa ma zahara minha. So the question arises that what exactly is the meaning of the word zina? Now, Imam Razi, a very celebrated commentator of the Quran, has said that the face is also part of the zina. So he says, Wal aqrab an al khalaqa dakhilatun fi zina, which means that the way a person is made, his or her appearance, of course, here we are talking about a woman's appearance, that is also included. In other words, a woman's face is also zina. This is Imam Razi's view. Ustaz Ghamidi says that this is linguistically untenable. It is linguistically incorrect. So, for example, Khalil Ahmad al-Farahidi, who is the author of the first famous lexicon of Arabic, which is called the Kitab al-Ain, he says that azina jami'un likulli ma yutazayyanu bihi. Similarly, Lisan al-Arab, Ibn Manzur is his author, he says azina ma yutazayyanu bihi, and basically both these statements imply that zina is something through which you embellish something, you add on something as an embellishment. Similarly, Taj al-Urus, it says azina bil kasr ma yutazayyanu bihi. Again, the same statement that something through which you adorn yourself, something through which you embellish yourself, and obviously it could refer to makeup, it could refer to jewelry, it could refer to your outer garment, but it cannot refer to the face per se. So the first question which Ustaz Ghamidi has answered, that the word zina cannot be linguistically applied on the word face. It must be applied to something which is added on as an embellishment. And hence jewelry or makeup, as far as the face is concerned, is the appropriate interpretation in this regard. The second question which has arisen on his stance is that the expression yaghuddu min absarihim of Surah Nur has sometimes been interpreted to mean that people should look at the ground. Basically, it is understood that it is used literally. So yaghuddu min absarihim would mean that men should stare down and not look at women directly. So we have Surah Hujurat, the third verse. It says, Inna allazina yaghudduna aswatahum inda Rasulillah ulaika allazina imtahanallahu qulubahum littaqwa. So the word Ghazza, you can see it appears here. It says, Allazina yaghudduna aswatahum. Those who lower their voices in the presence of God's Prophet. Similarly, in Surah Luqman, verse 19, the words are, Waqsud fi mashika waghzuz min sautika, which means, and be modest in your gait and keep your voice low. Waghzuz min sautika. The third important thing, or the third important area in which questions have arisen on his point of view, is regarding his interpretation of the word illa ma zahara minha. Of course, the expression in Surah Nur was wala yubdina zinatahunna illa ma zahara minha. Ustaz Ghamidi has taken these words to mean what is customarily and generally revealed in accordance with Abdullah ibn Abbas's opinion. Abdullah ibn Abbas's opinion is that something which is normally and customarily revealed is an exception to zina, and that can be displayed. I mean, it's exception to not hide it, and you can be displayed. And Ustaz Ghamidi has also cited Zamakhshari, who has actually summarized Abdullah ibn Abbas's view when he says, Illa ma jaratil aada wal jibilla ala zuhurihi wal asl fihi az-zuhur, which means except limbs which a person does not cover generally and instinctively, and they are always left bare. The second criticism which Ustaz Ghamidi has proffered here is that if the case was the same as what Abdullah ibn Masud is reported to have put forth, then the words should have been different. He says the word should have been illa an yazhara minhu shay, something that cannot be covered at all. And this meaning of illa ma zahara minha, which means that things that are visible, is something that has been mentioned in the Quran as well. In this meaning, that we have Surah Anam. The verse is La taqrabul fawahisha ma zahara minha wa ma batan. Of course, it means that you do not go near lustful things, whether they are hidden or whether they are zahir, whether they are open. So illa zahir minha is what the implication is. Something which is automatically bared, something which is left to be there. You don't instinctively and customarily hide it. Now, the fourth question which has been raised on Ustaz Ghamidi's view is that, according to his view, of course, unless and until a person has, or a lady has embellished her hair, then covering the head is not an essential, or it might be recommended, but it is not essential unless she has made up her hair, which means that she's embellished her hair. If she's not embellished her hair, then covering the hair is not mandatory. This is criticized, or the counter question which has arisen on this view is that when it is said, well, yadribna bi khumurihinna. So khumur, of course, is a plural of khimar. It means that outer garment that you covered yourself. So it is basically argued that the word khimar already was worn on the head, and it would be left dangling on the sides. And when it is said, well, yadribna bi khumurihinna ala juyubihinna, which means that they should cover their chests with this khimar, it automatically meant that the head was already covered, because khimar is something which is already there on the top of your head. So therefore, it is something which is from another verse of the Quran telling us that the head must be covered, even if it is not made up, even if it is not embellished. The fifth question regarding Ustaz Ghamidi's view is regarding shaking hands with women. So Ustaz Ghamidi says that as far as shaking hands with women is concerned, which is like a social greeting that often takes place when you meet women, this is not to be objected to, and this is not in distinction or contradistinction to what the norms of modesty or chastity are. And when the Prophet himself said that ana la usafihu nisa, which means I don't shake hands with women, he was referring to the fact that he does not do so out of his personal choice, especially when he's taking the pledge or the bay'ah, the bay'at that was taken when you place your hand in the hand of another woman. And that is something which the Prophet did not like, because of course in that case the hand is placed in the hand of another woman for a longer period of time, which is an extended period of time. Other than that, as far as shaking hands with women is concerned, because in the case of a normal greeting, this is done as a welcoming gesture, and it's just like a greeting gesture, and it has no sexual implication in it, and therefore it can in no way be objected to. The sixth thing which Ustaz Ghamidi's point of view actually brings out, and which is very important and which is very, very prominent, is that the word parda or hijab, parda in Persian or in Urdu, hijab in Arabic, or because the word has also been adopted in English, it has not been used anywhere in the Quran to the effect that is normally it is interpreted to mean, which means that you have to be in seclusion or you have to observe certain norms. There is not a single place that is mentioned in this meaning in the Quran. And so therefore he says that the right way to express these directives is not that these are directives of hijab or these are directives of parda. Basically, these are norms of gender interaction. And they tell us that men and women can sit together. They are not required to always observe this isolation of living or even meeting each other in segregation or being segregated at all is not something which is at all commanded by the Quran. In fact, the Quran at one instance has said that when you meet each other, men and women, an ta'kulu jami'an aw ashtata, if you eat together, sit together, separately, it's your choice. The seventh thing which has important underpinning as far as Ustaz Ghamidi's view is concerned, and that is that most people think that the issue of hijab, or as you can say, norms of gender interaction, the way these directives are given, the way women have been asked to at times cover their heads if they are made up their heads, or to hide their zina other than on places like your face and your head and your feet, then this is so that men are not incited. I mean, generally people think that women should do this so that men are not aroused. Now, this is something which is absolutely unrelated, and this illah or this consequence is not even found in the Quran. The Quran does not say that women have to be dressed up in this way so that men are not aroused. This is nowhere mentioned in the Quran. What the Quran actually says is Zalika azka lakum wa athhar, which means that this is more close to your own inner piety and inner purification. So these directives, according to Ustaz Ghamidi, must be placed in their proper perspective. And that perspective is that these directives are basically given, these norms, these directives which relate to discommunal conduct for our inner purification, for our own inner purification, and not to stop other people from getting aroused. The eighth question which has arisen and which is also a very important point is you find that in Surah Ahzab, the words which are used are yudnina alayhinna min jalabibihinna, which means they should let a part of their outer garment, which is a jilbab, dangle over them. As a result, people have come to the conclusion that this dangling actually means that they should cover their faces. And hence, yudnina alayhinna min jalabibihinna is taken to mean that they should cover their faces. Ustad Ghamidi says that this is not the correct interpretation as far as the construction is concerned. So, min jalabibihinna actually refers to what Zamakhshari has also pointed out. It says jilbabum min jalabibihinna, that yudnina alayhinna would just mean that you have to wear a jilbab, but it actually refers to the fact that it's any chadar, it's any shawl that you can do, and it's not that it has to be implied that this is something that is to fall on your faces. The last thing in this regard, which Ustaz Ghamidi has actually put forth, is that there are a number of hadith narratives which are put forth by authorities to counter his point of view or to counter what he has stated. And Ustaz Ghamidi has enumerated those narratives one by one, and even gone to the extent of trying to make sense out of them and telling them that how they have their own occasion and background. But the bottom line and the bottom thing in this regard is that he has pointed out that none of these narratives, none of them, not a single one of them is authentic. And it's not just his view. He says that all the scholars and muhaddisun, they regard these narratives to be weak, which means that they cannot be authentically ascribed to the Prophet, which in other words mean that none of these narratives can be in any way produced as an example to counter the view of Ustaz Ghamidi. So I'm just going to read out those narratives before you, just the translation of those narratives, and about each of them you can say that they are generally found. We know all these narratives around us. They are quoted right, left and center. They are cited by people, but we must mind this, that none of these narratives is authentically ascribed to the Prophet. So let's start off with these narratives. And the first of these narratives says that Salama said, I was with God's messenger along with Maimuna when Ibn Maktoum came to visit him. This incident took place after we had been ordered to observe hijab. So the Prophet said, hide yourselves from him. At this, we said, isn't he blind and cannot see? Because we know that Abdullah ibn Maktoum was blind. So she said that, isn't he blind? Thereupon the Prophet replied, are you both blind too? Can't you both see them? So Ustaz Ghamidi says that our muhaddisun have not accepted it, and hence it cannot be ascribed authentically to the Prophet. The second narrative is, Qais ibn Shammas said, a woman called Khallad came to the Prophet with her face covered. She asked about her son who had been killed in a battle. At this, some companions of the Prophet remarked, you have come with face covered to ask about your son. Thereupon she replied, I have lost my son, not my modesty. So in other words, again, this narrative which is quoted in favor of the concept of hijab, which our traditional scholars are more used to, again, you can see that this narrative is not authentically ascribed. The third narrative in this regard, so its words are, Abu Usaid al-Ansari stated that he heard God's messenger say to women while he had come out of the mosque, whilst men and women were walking together on the pathways, withdraw to the rear, and you must not walk in the middle. You must walk on the sides. After that, women would walk touching the walls so much so their clothes would get stuck in them. This also is a weak narrative. The fourth narrative in this regard is actually on the authority of Hazrat Ali, and it is quoted by Al-Bazzar in his Musnad. And the words are, Ali reports that once he was with God's messenger when the latter asked, what is the best thing for a woman? At this, the companions remained silent. So when I returned home, I asked Fatima, what is the best thing for women? She replied, that unrelated men should not see them. Later, I mentioned this answer before God's messenger. Thereupon he replied, Fatima is part of my body. Ustaz Ghamidi says that this narrative too is not authentically ascribed. And again, it's not just his opinion, but the opinion of the scholars of Hadith. The fifth narrative in this regard has been cited or quoted by Anas ibn Malik, and this is also found in the Musnad of Bazzar. So Anas ibn Malik stated Some women once came to God's messenger and said, "O God's messenger, men have taken all the blessings and taken the rewards of waging jihad for the cause of God. So what is left for us so that we can also earn the reward of those who wage jihad for the cause of God?" At this he replied, "Those among you who remain in their homes will get the same reward as men who fight for the cause of God." This also is a weak narrative. The sixth one is reported by Musa ibn Yasar from Abu Huraira, and it is found in the Sunan of Al-Bayhaqi. So Musa ibn Yasar reported from Abu Huraira, who met a woman who was laden with perfume. So he said to her, "O servant of God, do you want to go to the mosque?" She replied, "Yes." He said, "Did you put on the perfume for this purpose?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Go back, because I heard God's messenger say, any woman who goes to the mosque and with perfume on, God will not accept her prayer until she returns and bathes herself." This also is a weak narrative. The seventh narrative is also quoted by Imam Abu Dawud, and this narrative is actually from Aisha Ritala Anha. She narrates, once a woman extended her hand from behind the curtain to hand over a letter to God's messenger. The Prophet drew away his hand and said, "I do not know whether this hand is of a man or a woman." She said, "A woman's." The Prophet said, "If you were a woman, at least you could have colored your nails with henna." This too, as I've just referred to, is weak as far as our hadith authorities are concerned. The eighth and final narrative, which Ustaz Ghamidi has cited, is from Abu Umama, who reports from the Prophet, and this is found in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, that the Prophet said that any Muslim who looks at the attractive features of a woman and then draws away his eyes from her immediately, God will create sweetness in his worship rituals. So although, as I said, Ustaz Ghamidi has tried to explain these narratives, and he said that, well, there is a occasion and background and can be explained, but he has said that none of these narratives holds ground. All of them are untenable, all of them are weakly reported, and hence they cannot be relied upon. So viewers, with this we come to an end to this discussion of the topic of hijab, which is, as I said, more correctly titled by Ustaz Ghamidi as norms of gender interaction and not hijab. And inshallah, we'll come back again with you with a new objection and Ustaz Ghamidi's response towards it. Thank you very much.